Our father, the Kazekage, was approached by the leader of Otogekyure, a man known as Orochimaru. Naruto did not allow Temari to see his shock at that piece of news. He just nodded Temari to continue. I don't know what they talked about, but father began planning for an invasion a while after their meeting. He informed us that Otogekyure would be aiding us during the invasion to cripple Konoha. It was his plan let Gaara loose during the invasion. Since Gaara has full control of his bijou, he would be set free to destroy the village in his unleashed form. Is that right? Temari nodded, knowing that the invasion had practically failed, now that she had divulged the information. Naruto released a sigh. I suspected as much. Temari tried to hide the quiver in her voice. But why did you question me yourself instead of handing me over to the Hokage? Naruto removed the cold gaze from her, unconsciously making her relax. He looked back at her with a worried gaze. I don't think you would have liked being subjected to the interrogation department. Trust me, they aren't nice. Temari wholeheartedly agreed with that. She didn't even want to imagine what they would have done to get the information out of her. She looked up, and it was then she realized their positions. Her arms pinned to the wall, Naruto's legs in between hers and bodies pressed to each other's. Oh, and don't forget that their lips were once again separated by mere inches. A blush of massive proportions came onto her face as she locked gazes with Naruto, who realized the same thing as her. His face also matched the same shade of red as hers as he locked his gaze with her. An awkward silence descended upon them, which Temari broke after several moments. Naruto, she whispered, trying to think of something to say. But Naruto was on a different track from hers. This was his chance, his moment. And he was, in absolutely no way, wasting it. Not to mention, if he did waste this chance, Jiraiya would beat him to within an inch of his life and then some. So he was going to seize it with both of his hands. SSSHHH, he shushed her softly and leant forward, gently capturing her lips. It was the most pleasurable feeling Naruto had ever experienced. Her lips were soft, lingering with the taste of the ramen she ate earlier, which made her taste all the better. Temari went wide-eyed for a moment, but she closed her eyes in pleasure and slowly returned the kiss, molding her lips with Naruto. She knew it was wrong of her. They were enemies on the opposite sides of a war now. They shouldn't be kissing like this, but she couldn't help herself. She had, ever since the chaste kiss from that day, wanted to see for herself how Naruto's lips tasted like. Naruto felt like he was on cloud 9. He decided to take it a little further and bit her lower lip, causing her to gasp. He took advantage of it and pushed his tongue into her mouth, exploring it. He didn't know why, but he wanted to taste more of her, feel more of her. So he released her hands and put them around her waist, pulling her flush against him. Temari was stunned when she felt something wet entering her mouth and exploring it slowly. It took her a moment to realize that it was Naruto's tongue, but instincts were faster than her thinking. So even before she decided what to do, she was already massaging her tongue against Naruto. She couldn't even begin to describe the pleasure she was feeling. When Naruto released her hands, hers automatically went around his neck, pulling him close and further deepening their kiss. She could feel how warm Naruto was, since they both had practically molded their bodies together. They separated for a moment to take a breath, a string of saliva connecting their mouths. Before Naruto could even begin to think whether to do it again or not, Temari had already connected their mouths again, kissing him with more fervor than the previous kiss. Her tongue aggressively invaded his mouth, exploring it and massaging his own tongue with more force than what his tongue did to hers. Her one hand went up to his head, running through his hair. Naruto did not even think, he just enthusiastically returned her actions. His hands began to wander. First, they explored her back, then they explored her sides, each action gaining a pleased moan or sigh from Temari's mouth. He slid his hands lower, letting the primal part of his brain take control. His left hand wrapped around her waist again, while his right slipped lower and gently squeezed her butt. Temari felt like she was in heaven with all the pleasure she was feeling. In the back of her mind, she wondered whether Naruto was just this good or was it the euphoria of the first kiss. Either way, she wasn't complaining. She was about to break their kiss when one of Naruto's hands gently squeezed her butt. Pleasure racked through her body, and she released a loud moan of approval and pleasure. Naruto, taking it as a sign to continue, gently squeezed her other cheek, being rewarded with another moan. Suddenly, he didn't know why, he decided that Temari was standing a bit lower than what he liked. So he bent a little, taking hold of her inner thighs from behind, and hefted her up, pushing her against the wall, causing her to give out a surprised yelp, but she didn't break their kiss. Instead, her arms tightened around his neck while her legs wrapped around him, locking behind his back, their bodies pressing against each other even more. Temari's dress slid up from her thighs a little, exposing a bit of her thighs and skin for Naruto to feel. Naruto repositioned both of his hands on her clothed butt and squeezed, gaining moans of approval from Temari. They kept kissing like that for 5 more minutes, with Naruto occasionally and simultaneously squeezing both of her butt cheeks and gaining moans of pleasure, after which Naruto finally heard the rational part of his brain that was screaming, "You are going too fast, you idiot. Stop." Temari too, finally felt amidst all the pleasure she was feeling that they were going too far too fast and was about to break their kiss and leave, forcibly if she had to, but she didn't need to. Naruto broke their kiss first, looking at her with reluctance. No words needed to be said by either of them. Naruto gently released her, her legs coming to rest on the ground and his hands coming to rest on her waist, while hers moved to his shoulders. Both of them were breathing heavily, tasting each other's breath, trying to come down from the high. "I think we can both agree not to mention this to anyone," Naruto found his voice first. Temari silently nodded as both of them took a step away from each other, both feeling the lack of touch. Temari turned and walked away from Naruto, straightening her dress and smoothing out wrinkles when Naruto stopped her with his voice. "On the day of the finals, I'll see you on the other side," he said in a whisper, but each word was clearly heard by her. A lone tear slipped from her right eye, which she furiously wiped away. She did not care whether he saw her wiping it away or not. "Good night," she hastily whispered, and in a blink of an eye, she was gone. Naruto was still trying to get his thoughts in order. Absently, he raised his foot and stomped softly on the ground, muttering "Kai" under his breath, releasing the barrier. Only then he gave a reply to the empty surroundings, "Goodbye Sabaku no Temari." He flashed away after that. He had a simulation to demolish. He realized that he displayed lust on the surface, but deep inside, he knew it. He didn't know how or why, nor did he care. He just knew it. Temari was the one for him. He felt genuine feelings towards her. He didn't know how to describe them. He knew that it was far past the like stage. All he knew was that if he got the chance to hold her again, he would be grabbing it. And he would not let go of her that time. Unfortunately, that was the first and the last moment he would ever have with her, for in just 2 days, they would be on the opposite sides of a war, trying to kill each other. And Naruto knew that he won't be able to do it. He won't be able to kill Temari if she came before him. He had lost her, and the chances of being with her again were virtually impossible. Or so he thought. And, how was it? "Man, I sure was extremely nervous while writing out the kissing scene. I might have overdone it, for they are just 13 and 14-year-old teens. But I know the boundaries, and if anything is good, it's worth overdoing. Or so I think in some cases. Anyways, leave your thoughts in reviews. And I will be answering some reviews from the previous chapter. Oh, I almost forgot. Jiraiya considered himself as the biggest pervert in the world, and he was damn proud of the fact. He was also won the legendary Sannin, and perhaps the only remaining sage in the world. He was also a damn good teacher, judging from the notable students he had taught. The 3 war orphans from the village hidden in rain, they must have changed their village by now, for the good. Then there was the Yondaime Hokage. The man was in a league all of his own, and Jiraiya couldn't have been prouder of the shinobi that his student had become. But alas, he died too early, even by shinobi standard. Then there was his latest student, Uzumaki Naruto. Jiraiya had seen many young prodigies in his life. Hell, Konoha had no shortage of them. Uchiha Shisui, Uchiha Itachi, Namikaze Minato, Hatake Kakashi, his own teammate Orochimaru. But he had never seen one like Naruto. The boy was unbelievably skilled and powerful for someone of his age. He had impressive chakra reserves, excellent chakra control, intelligence to rival his father, all the makings of a prodigy. So Jiraiya promised himself that he would make Naruto a greater shinobi than even his father. But there was one thing that Jiraiya had failed to pass on to all his students: the art of perversion. Jiraiya had been a pervert since his genin days, and had never given up the habit. When he had taken on Minato as an apprentice, Jiraiya had believed that he had finally found the perfect student to pass his perversion onto. Minato certainly had the looks for it, unlike Jiraiya, and he already had loads of fangirls after him just for that. So it killed Jiraiya on the inside when his student acted all polite and modest and refused to take advantage of it. No matter how much he tried to persuade Minato, the guy had an unshakable will and was already fixated on that petite redhead of his. Not that Jiraiya had any problems with it, in fact he thought that Minato had landed an excellent catch. It's just that he couldn't get any research material out of that couple, no matter how hard he tried. It was with these sullen thoughts that Jiraiya wandered around the village, not even noticing how people were whispering with awe that the famed Toad Sage was walking among them right now. So into his thoughts he was that when he actually looked around him, he found himself walking in a fairly empty Konoha street. Very few people were in the street, and they weren't even wandering, instead just gossiping on doorsteps. Jiraiya sighed, hopping onto a roof as he surveyed the village. His thoughts shifted to his meeting with his sensei from last night. Naruto had just saved one of their jonin from being killed by the jonin sensei of the Suna team. Sensei had instructed him to remain in the village for the time being, since he was convinced that they would be attacked on the day of the finals. That caused his thoughts to shift on to Naruto. A small smile came onto his face. He had no doubt that the kid would thrash the Hyuga in his match, but immediately getting in the middle of an invasion right after his fight? Jiraiya could not say or think anything for certain. A movement was caught in his peripheral vision, causing him to turn to left. His eyes widened with glee upon seeing the sight, and it was all he could do from hooting and shouting in joy. There was his student, in an alleyway across from him, locking lips with the pretty, blonde genin from Suna. Not just any genin, Jiraiya thought, because he was pretty sure that she was the daughter of the Kazekage. Naruto, the son of the Yondaime Hokage, was kissing Sabako no Temari, the daughter of the Yondaime Kazekage. He didn't know whether it was fate or not, but he could care less about it. He wasted no time in whipping out his research notebook, hastily writing into it. Kinky, he giggled quietly, to not alert them of his presence, with a lecherous look on his face after he saw their positions. Naruto had Temari's arms pinned over her head, and both of his legs were in between the female blonde's legs. Oh ho ha! This is good. Go my student, go, he mentally cheered his student on. His joy at finding his student making out in an alleyway increased even further when Naruto released her hands and wrapped them around Temari's waist, pulling her flush against him. Temari wrapped her own arms around his neck, deepening the kiss further. This is the ultimate jackpot. He is all over her. And it's not just a simple kiss. They are eating each other's mouths. He might be my best student yet, and I haven't even begun teaching him about that. Jiraiya kept his giggle to himself as he gleefully wrote down God knows what in his notebook, not taking his eyes off the couple for a second. He almost broke his cover when he yelled in joy when he saw Naruto grabbing Temari's butt, earning a pleased moan from her. That did it for him. He kept his notebook aside and just watched them with great pleasure. He knew he would remember this forever. He is getting bold, that's for sure. He is doing it as if he has previous experience, but Sensei didn't mention any previous relationships. But judging from Ramon's, she seems to have no problem with him doing that. I'll just jot this down later, right now, I will see to the end of this. A trickle of blood fell from his nose as he continued watching them without any shame. He almost resorted to dancing on that rooftop when Naruto picked Temari up, her legs going on either side of him and locking behind his back as the kiss intensified even more. He is really, really good. I haven't seen something as good as this in years. Oh, my next book will be breaking records. He kept watching, nodding in equal parts of appreciation and glee as Naruto squeezed her but, earning pleasurable moans, back to back. At this rate, he might even get his cherry popped tonight. He was almost disappointed when the steamy make-out session came to an end, but that feeling was overridden by the immense pride and satisfaction he was feeling for his godson for landing such a girl for himself. He frowned, however, when they seemed to separate with solemn faces. Temari left, but not before shedding a tear at something Naruto said. Naruto didn't make her cry, that he was sure of, because the boy had the same feeling of sadness around him as the girl. It must have been something serious for them to get like that after a session such as that, he thought. No one should look that sad after a hot makeout such as that. Jiraiya knew he wouldn't, for he would jump at the chance. But perhaps his reasoning was flawed, for he hadn't had his first kiss in all 50 years of his life. Oh well, time to cheer, or maybe embarrass, his godson by letting him know of his audience. He finally let the giggle he had been holding in for so long loose. Naruto didn't disappoint him. His keen sense of hearing immediately picked up the giggles that he knew were aimed at him. Jiraiya was laughing on the inside when Naruto's face changed to that of horror. The amusement must have shone through his eyes, for Naruto's face instantly went red in embarrassment and anger. Mainly embarrassment though. He leapt towards Jiraiya like a tiger. But his mind must still be addled by pleasure, for Jiraiya dodged like he wasn't even trying. Jiraiya laughed as he prepared to flicker away. Thanks for the research material, brat. He was gone after that. Naruto fumed as he spread out his senses and easily locked onto Jiraiya. He couldn't believe that his first kiss, more like a makeout session, Kurama so helpfully reminded him, was witnessed by Jiraiya. What was worse was that the man had made research material out of it for his porn books. Like hell, he was going to let that happen. Things like that, no matter how awesome and pleasurable, were supposed to remain private.